All right. Oh, so attentive. All right, thank you so much, everyone, for coming out to Green Apple Books. I'm Brennan, I'm a bookseller here. And I'm very happy to welcome you to our event with Sally Wen Mao, celebrating her debut collection, Ninetails. And this is a really big night because this is also Publication Day, and it's huge, and it's the fiction debut of Sally. And joining Sally tonight is K-Ming Chang to celebrate all that. So let's do applause. So before I let them take the stage, I have to do a couple things. One, I want to do a land acknowledgement that we are on unceded Ramaytush Ohlone land. And in order to make land acknowledgement a more real form of action, we have a QR code in the back for the Ramaytush Ohlone Land Trust. And you can find that back there by the book and the sign. Brief business. Please silence your phones now if you haven't. You can take pictures as much as you like and post them on Instagram and tag them and share them. We love it. Videos, great too, reels. And while you're doing that, also maybe think about checking out our event calendar on our website for all the events we have coming up this month. And next month we have some great ones. The restroom is behind us. It's available to attendees, but not during the event. Please wait until after everything is done because we need to hear about this book. And we can't do that with people walking past the curtain. All right, so you got that. And we have copies of books by both of our authors tonight. And those are available at the cashiers up front. And this is a great moment for me to remind you that when you do buy their books after this event, which you should and you will, because I believe Sally will be signing and maybe, yeah, okay, both of them will be signing the books. So when you buy books from us, you're not just supporting independent bookstores, but you are also supporting authors like these two who work so hard at what they do to give you a great, satisfying read, and you get a book, which is great. So, all right, so first, K-Ming Chang is a Kundiman Fellow, a Lambda Literary Award winner, a National Book Foundation 5 Under 35 honoree, and an O. Henry Prize winner. She's the author of the novel Bestiary, which was longlisted for the Center Fiction First Novel Prize and the Otherwise Award. In 2021, her chapbook Bonehouse was published. Her story collection Gods of Want won the Lambda Literary Award, and her latest novel is Organ Meats. And her novel Cecilia was recently released, and it is available upfront for purchase, so go ahead and please give her a round of applause welcoming K-Ming Chang. Yay. Fabulous. All right. The main event. Sally Wen Mao is the acclaimed author. Yeah, good. You can go ahead and clap. Go ahead. Is the author of 3 poetry collections, Oculus, which was a finalist for the Los Angeles Times Book Prize and one of Time Magazine's 100 Best Must-Read Books of 2019, Mad Honey Symposium, which was a top 10 debut in 2014 in Poets and Writers, and then last year's The Kingdom of Surfaces, which I loved, a finalist for the 2023 Maya Angelou Book Award. They have been a recipient of 2 Pushcart Prizes and a National Endowment from the Arts Fellowship, and she's been published in the Paris Review, Harper's Bazaar, Guernica, PEN America, among others. And you can find rave reviews of her writing in national outlets such as The New Yorker, NPR, and Washington Post. She lives in New York City. Her debut story collection, Ninetails, is the reason we are here tonight. Let's welcome Sally, and I'm going to go away.
All right, thank you so much, everyone, for having us here today. Thank you, Green Apple Books on the Park. I love this place. I grew up here in the Bay Area, and K-Ming has been living here, right, for years. So it feels really good to fate this book here. So I'm going to say a few words before I read a section from Ninetails. I have spent about 8 years writing, revising, researching, editing, spiraling to arrive at this point. And I feel like as a poet, it's a little bit hard to make that leap into prose. And that's why it's like really meaningful to me that you all have showed up tonight. I'm grateful to my conversation partner, K-Ming Chang, whose work is so marvelous. I have long admired. I, really envelope pushing in like marvelous and speculative fiction and poetry. So, my family is here in the audience tonight, and this is the first time. This is the first time that's happened. I've had it means a lot to me, especially that my two baby cousins are here. One of whom is possibly an aspiring writer. And I remember when he was 2. So and it's also really meaningful to me that my grandmother is here tonight. She's 85 years old, and she gets car sick, but she braved a long car ride to get here. So my grandmother has also in her lifetime witnessed war and tragedy, atrocity and famine beyond understanding or recognition. I want to take this moment to express, as a writer and culture worker, my utmost solidarity with the people of Palestine experiencing a genocide and mass displacement and dispossession. As we come together today, writers, journalists, children, people in Gaza and in the Rafah crossing are being mass murdered and brutalized. And as a writer, I cannot be silent. I hope that we can grieve those loss and call for an end to genocide as we convene in our collective shared love of literature. Thank you. So I will read a section from the novella within this book that is called The Haunting of Angel Island. I grew up in the Bay Area. When I was in middle school, there was a sort of project in Mountain View where they took us on field trips to go see Angel Island, but they actually plucked out me and the only other Chinese person in my class to go on these field trips. And I remember just feeling really stirred as a 12-year-old at the poetry that was carved on the walls. So The Haunting of Angel Island, it depicts 9 stories of different women who have passed through the Angel Island Immigration Detention Center, which was a place that was built to kind of ensure that the Chinese exclusion laws are intact, and it survived between 1910 and 1940, so for 30 years. It was right here. And this is the last section. And it's from the perspective of the first Chinese woman who was an interpreter who worked on this island. 9. On muggy days, the sound of the fog bells from Point Knox moaned from the distance. Ever since she'd arrived at this post, Tai had marveled at the scrim of fog that covered this island, how different it looked from this vantage point, how the grasses on this island shone yellow like a little church girl's hair, their spectral stirrings alive against the fog. If she squinted, sometimes she could make out the cannons of Alcatraz against the shapes of distant ships. It was March 1913. By this time, Tai had worked at Angel Island for almost 3 years, and so much had changed. The year before, she'd landed on the front page of the San Francisco Examiner for casting a vote at the polling place at Powell and Pacific. California was the 6th state to grant women's suffrage, and Tai thought it was deliciously ironic that she should be among the first group of women to vote, before white women in other states could. The article described her as a pretty little Chinese maiden, and its headline read, "Pretty celestial maid of 21 casts ballot here, epic in the sex's emancipation." The author did not mention that Tai was employed by the US government, and it declared her one vote as the signal to an epoch in the history of the world's progress, the latest achievement in the great American work of amalgamating and lifting up all the races of the earth. Never mind what she actually witnessed day by day. Immigrants caged on Angel Island against their will, forced to eat and bathe together in conditions befitting chickens or livestock. Never mind that the Chinese Exclusion Act was still being enforced in full swing and prevented any Chinese immigrants from ever being naturalized. The idea that her lone vote could mean something to all the paper sons and daughters who lived in fear and precarity every day seemed absurd. She had other things to think about. For one, she'd met someone, the man she'd spotted on her first day, the red-haired immigration inspector. She'd learned his name was Charles Schultz, and he was a Scottish-born immigrant himself. She learned that he was the most desired inspector among the Chinese women, reputed to be the most lenient, merciful, and indeed, Tai found him pleasant to work with, unlike some of the other bullish inspectors who regarded her with unconcealed disdain. He was patient, never talked down at her. He even cracked dumb jokes to make the immigrants feel more at ease, jokes that she translated with care. One evening last September, she saw him step off the same ferry, but from the whites-only deck. She waved at him. He waved back. To her surprise, he lingered until she got off the ferry. He took her to a discreet watering hole near the pier and near empty saloon. They sat in a polished wooden booth facing a huge window that framed a view of the cobalt blue sea. Above, the seagulls cried, circling the shipyard at dusk. "Do you ever feel sad when they go?" he asked. "Do you get attached to them?" "Yes," she said, sipping the drinks he had bought her. Its taste stung her tongue, acrid and salty like the sea. "What do you do with that?" "I don't do anything. I keep my head down. I wish them well." "Do you have any regrets? I mean, with the women there," he said. At that moment, it felt like he was interrogating her, and it rattled Tai. His voice, a slow and husky drawl, the twang of formality he used with the interview subjects. Any series of questions, even innocent ones, triggered a defensive reaction in Tai, and she found herself adopting the same expressions she'd seen her detainees make. His last question most jarred her, because she would not dare answer honestly. Yes, she made errors of judgment. There was a time Tai caught a woman with a package full of coaching notes, and Tai turned her in to her supervisor, a move that eventually caused the woman's deportation. There was a time Tai broke the news that a beloved older woman was going to be deported, and several detainees spat at her. There was the time Tai hired an envoy surreptitiously so that a recently released young pregnant woman could procure an abortion. The woman never asked her husband for permission to terminate the pregnancy, and then the rumors reached him and he denied their relationship had ever existed. Donaldina admitted the girl into their missionary home, for now that she was freed of her husband and she had nowhere else to go, the girl entered into a trance, sick with fevers and fits for several months. In the end, Tai questioned whether it was the right decision to give her what she had wanted. Then there was the time another woman vanished right under Tai's nose. Poof, overnight, she was gone, and the other detainees whispered that it was because the missing woman had been a shapeshifter, a fox spirit. A shapeshifter? Tai wanted to laugh. God did not make women shapeshifters. If it were true, then no woman would stay a woman, least of all a Chinese woman. Still, nothing else could explain the woman's disappearance, just as nothing else could explain her reappearance a year later. Tai had not been prepared for the moment she walked into the newly rebuilt Palace Hotel and recognized that woman, sporting fox fur and the marcelled hairstyle popular at the time, which Tai understood involved a painful hot iron, sitting at the bar on the arm of a man who was clearly not the husband she had claimed in her papers. One of those oil barons with a mansion on Nob Hill? Brazen, thought Tai, brazen. I have many regrets, Tai said, finally. Charles asked her if she wanted another drink, though she had not finished her first. The night had descended full force. Without the ring of sun and purple oilskin sky, the seabirds hushed. She told him she really had to get going, and he asked if he could see her again. Of course I'll see you again, she said, tomorrow, when we work. I meant outside of work, like the way we are right now. Maybe we shall see. She trotted off, leaving him and her half-finished drink alone with the moon. Then the next day they returned to their post, avoiding each other at work, then converging again at their window in the watering hole at dusk. Again, then again, then again. I'm going to skip ahead to the end here. The truth was, sometimes when she walked into the dining hall with the detainees, she would experience momentarily something like the opposite of déjà vu. Jamais vu, they called it. A peculiar disorientation. Though she had been in that room every weekday for the past 3 years, she felt as if she were seeing it for the first time. White-hot fright shaped her spine as she stood in the room full of women who looked like her, with whom she had nothing else in common. It was the loneliest feeling, that alienation and bewilderment, as if she were the only one alive on that island, that the room was full of sad, vengeful ghosts ready to bite into her. At their sorrow and anguish, she retained a kind of disgust. How embarrassing, all their gaping wounds carved onto the wooden walls, the bathroom stalls for all to see. At such times, in the throes of jamais vu, Tai would have to catch herself and breathe. So she would get away from all those women, those embarrassing misfits, these pathetic vandals, and down the hall she would walk, her nails scratching each and every poem on the walls. Down the hall, jade paint peeling, into the bathroom, where there was one cracked mirror, its edges all covered in poems, endless poems.
Thank you so much. That was an incredible reading, and you read one of my favorite lines in the whole book that I'll ask a question about it later. So I was just so thrilled. Thank you for that lovely reading. I wanted to start first, just asking you about the conceit of this book, the idea of Ninetails, the novella being in 9 parts, and the nine-tailed fox. And I love how many different iterations of the fox that we get throughout the book in multiple languages, across time and space. And the foxes themselves are described as master shapeshifters and master border crossers. So I was wondering if you could speak about your interest in foxes and fox spirits, and your origin story for creating this concept of Ninetails.
Thank you so much. So, I wasn't a mythology nerd, but then I just came across, the nine-tailed fox. I think I remembered. I was at the Coleman Center, which is a fellowship at the New York Public Library, and they give you a really cushy 9 months to do research and work on a book. And I remember the first month I arrived there, I had already finished the project that I was proposing for that. So I was like, wow, I'm so free. What am I going to do? Should I jump genres? Should I try to write a short story? So I decided I would try to write a short story about a nine-tailed fox spirit who is trying to date in New York City. And then what happened was I kept going down this rabbit hole, and there's so much scholarship about this creature, and I had no idea. I kept following it, and I think I was having lunch with a friend, the poet Eugenia Lee, and she said, you should write a whole book of these. And then I thought, there's 9 months in this fellowship. There are 9 tails, in the fox, like 9 tails. And like, this is a really obvious pun. So I thought, okay, I'm going to try to write a story every month. And each story is like a tale, from the nine-tailed fox. And I think, it took me on a journey, and that was 2016, 2017, and I did come up with 9 tales, but the book as it is right now, it's very different from like the first draft that I worked on back in 2017. So many lives.
I love that. I love the endless permutations of the fox within the book, and then how foxes themselves have these endless permutations throughout history, as you were saying. I also love these like guardian spirits that you brought us today. Yeah. I feel very protective, or maybe a little sly,
Yeah, no, the foxes, there's just like the thing that enchanted me about the foxes, like you mentioned before, that they're border crossers. They can shapeshift too. So they really transcend these sort of rigid social like statuses that are so like they so determine human life in China. So I was really interested in that like difference, that difference between like women who are like really subjected to all these gender roles, and then the fox spirit who can transform into women and then transform back into foxes. They can be, they can be really derelict. They can be beggars on the street, or they can be like concubines, like kingdom destroying, like concubines of the king. Like they really transcend like this idea of what is like marginal and what is not marginal, because like they just like move around so freely. And I thought that was like amazing. And I think the people, the scholars, a lot of like Chinese male scholars like wrote these like tales of the strange about foxes, and they were writing about it. I think they were writing these foxes out of like this misunderstanding of femininity and like women and sexuality, and I thought that like these men are very conservative, and they invented this creature that somehow transcends all boundaries, and that is what they're afraid of. But then there's a way that like trope has sort of like transcended its inventors. So that's why I was like really interested in leaning into the fox lore.
I love that idea of the tropes transcending their creators. That's so beautiful. And I also love what you were saying about like writing a story for 9 months, because this book is, a pregnancy is 9 months, and this book is its own being, its own living creature out in the world. It's so poetic and beautiful. I love that. And I actually wanted to ask about like intertextuality and how many other texts are referenced within the book. I remember keeping track. Which I love so much. It feels like it borrows a lot from, essay forms. Like, it's very formally and structurally innovative, and I love getting to see, like, the forms of a research essay being used for fiction, or the form of a lyric essay within fiction, and especially the references to, Pu Ling's Strange Tales from the Chinese Studio. And what you were saying about how these men, they're often writing about fox spirits as a way to, like, turn women into the abject, and this idea that if you're a woman who doesn't conform to these roles, then you're estranged from society, and estranged from humanity. And it's very like being evil is sexy, or being sexy is evil. It's like one of those. And one of the parts of the lore that I love so much is that they suck out like men's young energy by like draining them of semen, which it's so fantastic. I'm kind of obsessed with that concept. Just personally, I think it's so wild. And I think it's just also so much projection that is really funny. It's just like kind of comical. So I was wondering what that research process was like and what it was like kind of folding all of these other references to text into your writing, whether that was something you were like conscious of and deliberately doing, or if it was just a natural part of your process.
Yeah, I as a poet, I'm a very research-oriented poet. I'm always like going down rabbit holes, foxholes, and with this, like I was literally at the library every day on this fellowship, and I could borrow any book I wanted, and that was dangerous for me. And I remember there were a couple of texts that were really useful to me. There were two scholars who worked on like fox lore. One of the scholars focused more on religion, so that was Xiaofei Khan. She talked a lot about like different fox cults that emerged throughout China's history, like actual people who were worshiping fox spirits and like built shrines for them. And then the Rainier Huntington, Alien Kind, was the other scholar whose her work was more about like the narrative tales and the literature of like I think she defined it as like the late imperial time in China. But what I noticed in both writers is that actually like the figure of the nine-tailed fox, it goes way before late imperial times. It goes way before the Qing dynasty. It goes before the Tang dynasty. Like it was apparently like the first like appearance of like the nine-tailed fox was in this like weird bestiary from like I don't know, like the ancient classic, like classic of the mountain and the seas. Yes. So that's wild to me. It was wild to me that the fox spirit has like lived on for more than 1,000 years, like thousands of years. Like it's definitely like outlived most of the scholars who were writing about it. And I found it like, and I also read like Pu Songling's, like the John Minford translation of the Pu Songling's Strange Tales, which, you know, it's really marvelous and wild and like weird. And yeah, like you said, it's like, it's a lot weirder and sexier than you would imagine, like a classical tale would be, right? And just wild and kind of gross, right? But it was still very much like male fantasy, you know. And I the one story that I wrote after Pu Songling in the collection is called Lotus Stench, and it's after his story Lotus Scent. And in his story, it's like a young scholar meets like a sexy fox and then also a sexy ghost, and then he starts like two-timing them, and then they become a throuple. That's the original story. But then in my story, I'm like, you know, yeah, like my story, like it kind of cuts out the guy. It's like, okay, they find out he's two-timing them, so they dump him. And then they kind of embark on their own little like friendship, right?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite stories in the whole book is the ghost fox roommate situation. I loved it so much, and I love it. Kind of harkens back to what you were saying of how you first envisioned, you know, the fox like trying to date in New York. So taking these very like mythical folkloric figures and placing them in these these kind of everyday conflicts that we're in and everyday questions that we ponder. I wonder if that was kind of always there as an impulse, or if that was something that you like specifically kind of had to reach for or conceptualize. It feels like it came out fairly naturally, this combining of different elements.
Yeah, like it's I like what you said earlier about like sort of a lyric essay form, but like I like to experiment on like the ways the different containers like a story can materialize in, and like I you know, the fox, it transcends boundaries, right? So like why not poets, right? Why not writers? And I like and I really wanted to transgress as many boundaries as possible, right? Like I thought that the Lotus Stench story, I will, I displaced that Pu Songling story into the present. I have another story where, like it's the fox is less present because it's more like this being that haunts and possesses. And that story, Love Doll, it's like from the perspective of a sex doll.
I love that story so much.
But yeah, I think it's a series of what ifs. Like I write poetry like speculatively because that is like where I'm most drawn to. And so I think I was trying to use my speculative poetry muscle in this like new genre.
Yes, I love that idea of trying to transgress as much as possible, because I definitely feel that, like, formally genreized. And even the book itself, I feel like, is such a transgression in itself, because speaking of research, I feel like immigrant women are so often excluded from any form of historical record. So I wanted to transition to this question about living within and also, like, obliterating the patriarchy, because I feel like this book is very much tackling both. And to me, the beating heart of this book and the thing that made me feel like, oh, this is the book I've been waiting to read, desperately, like, dying to read, is the way that it's totally unafraid to confront the systemic and interpersonal violence of patriarchy and of borders. And it centers, migrant women specifically. So I was wondering, how did you set out to approach those, and did you encounter any challenges or triumphs in writing about immigrant women specifically?
Right, yes. So with the Haunting of Angel Island, like that was a story that I really wanted to write because it was so significant. Like it was so significantly a part of my like consciousness as a young person. And I went to that like island and I saw the poetry on the walls, and I just remembered having a very visceral reaction as a 12-year-old, and I later in high school tried to write poetry about it. And I just thought, like, I think it's one of the later stories that I added, and I think I wrote it during the height of the pandemic, where I was thinking a lot about what it meant to be confined somewhere, right? And also like thinking about like the different narratives that are tied to Asian bodies, like, and immigrants specifically, how they're diseased and how they are not welcome. One of the things that happened on Angel Island is that they would like force everyone to provide like stool samples, and this was very humiliating for the recent immigrants and the recent arrivals, and they just kind of assumed that people had hookworm, which was like the disease that they used to kind of justify like this mass like expulsion, in addition to the Chinese immigrant the exclusion laws and everything. So I really wanted to write about that time. I think I went down another rabbit hole, and I thought about like how does this relate to foxes? Like foxes are like one of the things that Rainia Huntington thinks scholars taught me was that foxes actually they haunt like residences that tend to be liminal spaces. So like boarding houses or abandoned temples, like foxes take up residence. So I'm like, well the ultimate space, liminal space, is an immigration station. So of course Angel Island, I can imagine, is haunted by these foxes.
Yeah, that's so beautiful. And there's a quote in the second story of The Haunting of Angel Island where one of the characters says that lies are the glue that holds families together. And so much of the book is about the power of lying. And, immigrating through Angel Island, the necessity of lying to become a paper son or paper daughter in order to be allowed in. It reminds me of Maxine Hong Kingston writing about the crooked path and the idea of Chinese immigrants having to take this slanted or crooked path in order to safely migrate. So I was wondering, the original phrasing of this question was, what is your relationship to lying? But I think maybe a better, more craft way to phrase it is, do you think of lying as a literary device? Like how I guess, yeah, what is your relationship to lies and lying?
No, lying is the ultimate literary device, right? Lying in order to tell the truth, maybe. I think, yeah, there's something, I guess with the Angel Island story in particular, there's just something very depressing about just recreating the history. So I wanted to like speculate a little bit, right? Like and maybe like lying, I would say that lying is part of speculation, and like that requires imagination. I think you're a bad liar if no one can, you know, believe your lies, right? But like you have to kind of like work at that skill. Not that I use that skill a lot, but I think as writers we're always like we always have to like choose like the balance between the truth we want to express and the facts, like the facts, the truth, you know, the speculations, the fibs, the embellishments, the straight up lies, right? Because sometimes like when like the truth is pretty awful, right? The truth is pretty horrible, and you want to invent some kind of hope, so you have to be somewhat delusional in order to get to a place where you feel like you feel like hope can wait, right?
Yeah, I love that because, you know, the book ends on, so many of the stories end on like an image or a feeling of hope or possibility or transformation or something limitless on the horizon, which feels so true to the spirit of you know, the Huijing of the fox spirit. And then that in contrast to these worlds that do not permit their freedom, they're like fundamentally at odds. Like they themselves have this limitless transformative potential, but then are living with worlds that are very much trying to police that. And I guess it kind of made me think about like the difference between power and agency, that you can have power but not necessarily agency. And I don't know how did you write about, I guess, that relationship of being in conflict with the world, or knowing that the world is like fundamentally at odds with you, but then also, like you said, having that sense of hope or like burgeoning power or potential.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like I guess I write a lot of the women in these stories are very depressed. That's something I realized. Like I have a story where there's a woman who like her tears, like every time she cries, like flies come out of her eyes, and like that is another form of depression. Like she can't cry, she can't like express her emotions or her despair, and that is a huge impediment to her. And then I think at the end of that story she goes on a desert retreat and she just like lets the flies out. And I think like there's something, you know, like in a small moment like that, or like a moment of personal agency where you just decide that like, why am I hanging on to this thing still, right? Like there's a story about like a crush, you know, it's actually set in San Francisco, it's called The Crush. And yeah, and it's about a woman who has a crush, and you know, and then like and as her crush like increases, like the rock, the size of the rock that represents the crush, it increases, and then, you know, at the end she has to decide like, what is this? Maybe I need to be liberated from this crush, right? Like, and I think even the Lotus Stench story where the two women like they were cheated on with each other, but then they chose to be friends, and then they decided also to like, you know, be a fox and a ghost together, which means they haunt places, they play pranks on people, they you know, they do these like small subversive thing. They like steal some car from Billionaires Row in New York City and they take it for like a joyride. They break into places, and that I think is it's fun because it's like wish fulfillment. It's like a lie, right? Like it's of course I want to steal from a billionaire, but I can't. But maybe this fox and this ghost can, because they have the power.
love that. The playfulness is why I think that's part of the fox's powers, this sense of play and that slipperiness. It's, kind of irreverent in a way. And I feel like I love your, poet's approach to genre and, metaphor as magic, as a form of magic. So it's just so beautiful. But I wanted to go back. See, I was like, now hope, back to depression. But back to depression. I feel like there is such a running theme of, alienation or a sense of loneliness. Mm-hmm. And also that story that you mentioned, the beautiful, crying fly story, it reminds me of, how Chinese mermaids cry pearls, their tears are pearls, and I was like, oh no, we make precious their suffering. It's so awful. It's such a curse. But yeah, I was wondering how you approach writing about loneliness, and people often describe writing as also a very lonely activity or a writer's life as being very lonely, which is interesting, and I wonder to what extent you agree with that.
I actually don't agree with that. I don't think the writing life is lonely. As a matter of fact, I think, it's less lonely, I think. I know, I feel like there's an epidemic of loneliness. This thing is always on the news, right? And I think it's one of my topics that I'm always trying to grapple with, as a product of the one child act. I didn't grow up with siblings, and I often had to invent imaginary friends. I didn't have that many friends growing up. I used to pray for friends when I was in middle school. It's so funny, in Mountain View, California. But yeah, I thought that there's something really interesting in that feeling that I wanted to kind of continually probe. There's another story called The Fig Queen, where this woman is fed up with her life. She's depressed, right? She's depressed, she's lonely, she got dumped. So she decided she wanted to shrink into a very, very tiny person. And then so she does. She shrinks into a very, very tiny person, and she's very, very happy and excited at first, but then she starts seeing a doppelganger living her life for her while she's just a tiny person. And that doppelganger seems to have more friends and more community than she does, and so it makes her question things. Where am I even going with this? I don't I guess I think writing and art is a way of sort of leaning into those really negative, those kind of heartbreaking feelings, right? And what can you do with a feeling like heartbreak, or what can you do with a feeling like abject loneliness? I guess you have to write into it, because it's true that someone maybe will eventually read it, and then maybe you will share a moment like we're sharing, where we can connect on that level, which I think is so precious. It's as precious as a mermaid's tear.
No, that's so beautiful, and you're right. I do think it's this very masculine myth that you go off into your locked room and you write to be above the world. So I very much enjoy that myth busting. Are we good on time? I just want to check in on time.
So should we open it up to the audience now? Yeah, great. So if any of you have contributions to the conversation or questions, we're here.
Thank you both for being here, and I'm appreciative of just being in the space with you guys. Sally, you've been on my syllabus before because of Surface of Kingdoms, and K-Ming, you'll be on the syllabus next semester. So that'll be scary. And from the sounds of it, Ninetails will be also. So this is kind of a question of coming from a place of selfishness. I find when I'm writing, especially the piece that I'm working on right now, voice is really clear and plot is really clear, but structure and form are not, so I'm struggling a lot with that. And I'm excising pieces and writing whole new pieces anew. So I wonder if you guys could answer this. How do you cope with form, especially since you transcend poetry and prose? And is there a specific part of the writing process that you struggle with the most, and how do you overcome it?
Yeah, I'll paraphrase the question for the online folks. There was a question about when writing, like how to find the structure and the form, especially as someone who moves fluidly between poetry and prose. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, such a great question. I don't know. I have the same problem you do. I think it's a lot of adding, subtracting, experimenting, presenting it to my editor, being like, is this okay? I think I just feel lucky because I had an agent who I signed on to sort of before this project became had like a publishing date or whatever, and I think my agent helped me a lot because I had no confidence whatsoever. I was just experimenting with form. I think actually I went to a talk with the poet / novelist Kaveh Akbar, and Kaveh did this thing where he just watched a movie, like several movies per week, and then read like several novels like back to back for a given amount of time, and in that sort of practice, the sort of like leaning into seeing how other people do it, you achieve some sort of like symbiosis with like the work that you consume. And so I consumed a lot of work by people who I knew I wanted to do something kind of similar to what they were doing. I felt like K-Ming is one of those people, right? Like lyrical writing that's also like draws from mythology and yeah, just to have a lot of like cultural touchstones that kind of give you sort of a blueprint, and a lot of tinkering, a lot of self tinkering, like just doing what you're doing. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. I feel like both of you have books about like humans and animals like mixed together. So I'm curious if you guys would recommend other books or writers in that tradition.
Neat. So the question from Hua is, both of us have books that tackle humans and animals, and whether there are other books that we can recommend that also do similar things.
Or that like inspired you.
That inspired us, yes.
I feel like the first thing that comes to my mind, probably because there's a Studio Ghibli poster outside the door, is Howl's Moving Castle. Because I think about that like transformation of Howl into a bird, and like entering this portal world. So that's one thing that inspires me. But,
all the Ghibli movies, like the Totoro, the Cat Bus. The Cat Bus was very inspiring to me. But in terms of literature, I mean, there's a lot. So I'm trying to like find all find the moving. I think about Maxine Hong Kingston, even though that book was called like Ghosts, like Ghost was like the key word of that book. There was a scene where the mother was in the dormitory and she was haunted by a fox spirit, and I was definitely very like attuned to that. Growing up, I had a book like that I got from the Scholastic book fair, about like animals that help humans, and there were very heartwarming stories about like dogs that rescue people, and I think I read that book like 17 times. I'm trying to think of more, but obviously, yeah.
Yeah, I feel like the Monkey King also is
the Monkey King,
as like the ultimate trickster and defier of the heavens, kind of trying to rattle the hierarchy of the heavens is something that sticks with me. Yeah.
Yes, and there's this like Yoko Tawada book, Memoirs of a Polar Bear, that was like written from the perspective of a polar bear, which is great, you know. And honestly, a lot of poets too. A lot of poets write into like animals and animal stuff. You know, Terrence Hayes' last book was very like really into like the tree frogs and things like that.
Yeah. Anyone else? Yes.
So I haven't read the book yet. I understand, but from what I'm hearing, the fox spirit is always like in a trying to find a relationship or like getting dumped or like getting cheated on. And I'm wondering like. This is a sideways question I'll ask you later, but the question I'm going to ask now is, what love advice would you give the fox spirit?
Oh, wait, I'm going to paraphrase this question because people need to know this at home. And I forgot to paraphrase the last one. I'm so sorry. But the question is, what love advice would you give the fox spirit?
Yeah, so, I mean, the fox spirit, there's actually, at least a few stories where, you know, the person who is alone stays alone, you know, and that's okay. I think that's like, honestly, I think the fox spirit has a lot of advice to give us as humans, because the thing about a fox spirit that is really interesting is that the earlier thing you said about fox spirits extracting from their, you know, conquests in order to like the yang, the supply of yang, you know, foxes are very yin and they need some yang, and then when they like seduce humans, they like cultivate that yang and they cultivate that essence, that human essence, toward this thing called transcendence, which basically means that they become like the immortal nine-tailed fox divinity. And that's the whole reason why they're like doing all this stuff in the first place. Like the first way is that they can like go into like isolation, total isolation on a remote a remote forest and like study the classics for thousands of years. That's the first way to like achieve immortality and transcendence. And then the second way is to steal human essence. And a lot of foxes go the second way. They seduce, they bewitch, they enchant, they possess, and then they're doing it so that they can transcend the desire to be earthbound and to be in relation, to be in a romantic relationship, right? Like because what happens when a fox becomes divine or immortal is that they say goodbye to all of that. They're like, goodbye, they give up all their earthly their earthly connections. So it's actually kind of sad, but it's also kind of like, wow, it's liberating. It sounds liberating. I can see why they have spent like thousands of years trying to achieve that.
Yeah, I love that, the idea of working towards being totally self-sufficient and cultivating your own internal energy and spirit is really beautiful. You're right.
Yeah,
they have
becoming a
things to
divinity.
say. Yeah, they have things to tell us.
Yeah.
Yeah. One more question.
Okay, one more.
Yeah.
I'm a poet transitioning into writing my first novel. Well, so everything you're saying is like really making me feel a lot of things.
Oh.
And also, I used to have a column called "The Wind in Your Fox Fur."
Oh.
And so everything you just said, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. So it's more of just like, I feel more connected to everything you were talking about.
Oh, thank you. That's so wonderful. I like it. It's all aligning, isn't it? See?
Oh, it's so beautiful.
That's so beautiful. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for being here tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. Thank you.
I'm going to do one last very selfish thing. I promise it'll take like 20 seconds. But I planned a rapid fire round of 8 this or that questions. Lucky number 8, we have to do them. So this will be very fast. Okay, 10 seconds. Heaven or earth?
Earth.
Poetry or prose?
Poetry.
That's a pop up, but we'll keep going because we don't have time. Okay. Ninetails or fox canines?
Ninetails.
Shape-shifting or invisibility?
Shapeshifting.
Seduction or destruction?
Seduction.
Yin energy or yang energy?
Yin energy, for sure.
Lies or truth?
Lies.
Revenge or forgiveness?
Revenge. So good, so perfect.
Thank you.
Let's do more. Oh, you can say more applause.
Thanks so much. That was fantastic.
Well, if you're going to get your book signed, and you should because you're going to buy one, Sally will be standing right where Car Johnson is, my great leader. And thank you so much for coming again, and thanks to both of you. I feel like podcasts, you should do that. Have a great night. Thank you so much for coming.